The applause was deafening. Bright lights washed over me, and the heavy, cold weight of the award in my hands should have been the proudest moment of my life. My heart raced, my palms sweaty from gripping the microphone. "Thank you," I managed to say into the mic, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry over the room. "This means more than I can put into words." Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I scanned the crowd instinctively, searching for the familiar faces I dreamed of seeing tonight. Mom's proud smile, Dad's approving nod, maybe even my brother's teasing smirk. But there was nothing. Not a single person from my family. Just rows of strangers and polite claps from people who barely knew me. My chest tightened. I told myself they'd come late, that maybe traffic had delayed them. But I knew better. An hour ago, a mutual friend had sent me a photo that burned into my mind like acid. My entire family laughing on a sunny beach somewhere out of state, drinks in hand. My brother holding up a peace sign, Mom in her favorite sun hat, Dad holding a cocktail like they didn't have a care in the world. They didn't forget. They just chose not to be here. When the ceremony ended, I stepped off stage into the shadows at the side of the hall, my heels clicking against the polished floor. My throat felt tight, my stomach twisting. All I wanted was to get outside and breathe. That's when I felt it, a warm hand brushing against mine. I turned sharply, startled, but all I caught was the back of a tall figure in a charcoal suit disappearing into the crowd. In my palm, something small and cold rested against my skin. A key, a simple brass key with a small tag that read, in neat handwriting, "Welcome home." I froze, my pulse hammered in my ears. Before I could process what just happened, my phone buzzed violently in my clutch. I pulled it out and my breath caught. 78 missed calls. Every single one from Mom, Dad, and my brother. My hands shook. What could have possibly happened between that beach photo and now? I stepped into the chilly night air, my mind spinning, my heels crunching against the sidewalk. Across the street, a black SUV idled, tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. For a brief moment, the passenger window rolled halfway down, and a pair of sharp, watchful eyes met mine. The car didn't move. Neither did I. My phone buzzed again. A new text from Mom. "Come home, now." But in my other hand, that brass key felt heavier than my award. And I had a feeling, deep in my gut, that whatever door it unlocked was going to change everything. The street lamps cast long, fractured shadows across the pavement as I stood frozen, the brass key biting into my palm. The award in my other hand suddenly felt like a meaningless trinket, something I'd once thought mattered, but now was just weight I wanted to throw away. That black SUV still hadn't moved. I could feel its engine rumble faintly through the cool night air. Every instinct told me to walk, no, run, in the opposite direction, but my phone buzzed again, pulling me back into the moment. "Dad, answer your phone." "Mom, it's serious." "Ethan, my brother. Pick up. Now." My thumb hovered over the call button. My family hadn't spoken to me in weeks except for the occasional obligatory text. And now, suddenly, they were desperate to reach me? My chest tightened, not from fear but from something sharper. Resentment. I slipped the key into my clutch and started walking, my heels tapping a steady rhythm on the concrete. The SUV's engine revved softly, my eyes flicked toward it. The window rolled down another inch. A man's silhouette leaned forward, his face still shadowed, but I could feel the weight of his gaze. I quickened my pace toward the side street, the city's noise muffling as I turned the corner. My phone rang again, and this time I swiped to answer before I could overthink it. "What?" My voice came out colder than I intended. "Madison," Mom's voice cracked, a sound I'd never heard from her before. "You need to come home right now." "Why, so you can leave again?" I shot back. "Or maybe so you can tell me in person why a trip was more important than—" "Madison, please," she interrupted, urgency edging her tone. "Something's happened. It's about the house." I stopped dead in my tracks. "What about the house?" There was a muffled sound, like someone grabbing the phone from her. Then Dad's voice came on, low and clipped. "Who gave you a key?" The air around me felt suddenly heavier. "What?" "The key," he repeated, his words sharp. "You didn't get that from us. Who gave it to you? My mouth went dry. Why does it matter? You don't understand, he said, his voice strained, almost angry. That key, it doesn't belong to you, it's… The line went dead. I stared at my phone screen, my reflection warped in the glass. My pulse was a steady roar in my ears. Whoever had slipped me that key wasn't just playing a game. They knew something. Something my family didn't want me to know. And right now, I wanted answers more than I wanted to breathe. I turned back toward the main street, but the SUV was gone. Instead, on the sidewalk in front of me, a single envelope lay face down, the paper rippling slightly in the breeze. I bent down slowly and picked it up. My name was scrawled across the front in black ink. No return address, no markings. Just my name. The envelope was sealed, but faintly I could feel the hard, flat edge of what was inside. Not paper, not money, something else entirely. I glanced up and down the street. Not a soul in sight. The temptation to rip it open right there gnawed at me. But so did the thought that I was already in way over my head. Still, my fingers were already tearing at the edge. The flap tore open with a soft rip, the sound loud in the stillness of the street. I slid the contents into my hand, a small laminated photograph and a folded piece of stiff paper. The photo stopped me cold. It was my family, not the laughing, sunlit version I'd seen from their trip earlier. This was different. They were seated around our dining table, except it wasn't our dining table anymore. The chairs, the tablecloth, even the lighting were different, like it was staged somewhere else entirely. Their faces were pale, tense, eyes darting at something outside the frame. My father's hand rested flat on the table, his knuckles white. Mom's gaze was cast downward, her lips pressed into a hard line. My brother sat rigid, his jaw tight, shoulders squared as if bracing for something. In the lower right corner of the photo, a faint reflection in a glass cabinet caught my attention. A figure, tall, wearing that same charcoal suit I'd seen earlier tonight. My breath hitched. Whoever slipped me the key had been in the room with them. I unfolded the stiff paper next. It wasn't a letter, it was a floor plan. Not of our current home, but of the house we'd lived in when I was a child. The one we'd moved out of suddenly, without much explanation, when I was 12. Rooms were marked in bold red ink. One upstairs bedroom had a circle drawn around it, the words "check inside" scrawled next to it. I stood there in the cold, clutching the floor plan like it might disappear if I blinked. My phone buzzed again, this time a video call from Ethan. Against my better judgment, I answered. His face filled the screen, eyes wide, voice low and fast. "Maddie, listen to me. If anyone gave you something tonight, you can't…" He stopped abruptly. His gaze shifted as though someone else had walked into the room. His voice dropped even lower. "They'll hear me, just don't go there. You understand? Don't…" The screen went black. My skin prickled. The air felt charged, like the moments before a storm breaks. A cold gust swept down the street, rattling a loose sign against the brick wall nearby. I glanced around, half expecting to see the SUV again, but the road was empty. The floor plan and photo were still in my hand. I could shove them back into the envelope, go home, pretend none of this happened. But the truth was already under my skin. The key was still in my clutch, warm from where I'd been holding it earlier. Something had happened to my family, something ugly. And whatever it was, they were more afraid of me knowing the truth than they were of facing it themselves. I tucked the envelope inside my jacket, squared my shoulders, and made a decision. I was going back to that house, not the one they lived in now. The old one, the one they never wanted to talk about. And I was going tonight. The city's glow faded behind me as I drove toward the outskirts, my award lying forgotten on the passenger seat. The streets grew quieter, darker, the hum of streetlights replaced by the low, steady rhythm of my car's engine. It had been years since I'd been anywhere near that neighborhood. As a kid, I'd never questioned why we left so suddenly. My parents had framed it as an opportunity, a better school district, a bigger backyard, more privacy. But now, retracing the old route in the dead of night, I could see the lie for what it was. The houses here were older, tucked behind overgrown hedges and half-collapsed fences. Memories stirred like dust in the back of my mind. Riding my bike down these cracked sidewalks, hearing my mom call me in for dinner, my dad's voice low and sharp during late-night arguments. When I finally pulled up to the old house, my hands tightened around the steering wheel. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling, and one of the shutters hung crooked, swaying gently in the breeze. The porch light was off, but a faint glow seeped out from somewhere inside, as if a single lamp had been left burning. My pulse quickened. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, letting the silence close in. The key felt heavier than ever in my jacket pocket. I stepped out into the cold, gravel crunching under my boots, and climbed the creaking porch steps. The door's lock was old. I remembered it sticking sometimes. But when I slid the key in, it turned without resistance. The click of the latch echoed unnaturally loud. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and something else. Metallic. The living room was almost bare, stripped of the furniture I remembered. The walls were a dull, faded beige, but faint outlines remained where pictures had once hung. I shut the door softly behind me, my footsteps muffled on the worn carpet. Every creak of the floorboards made me pause and listen. The glow I'd seen from outside came from the kitchen, an old desk lamp perched on the counter, its warm pool of light falling across a stack of papers. I moved closer, my fingers brushing the edges of the documents. Property deeds, bank statements, all with my father's signature. And then, tucked beneath them, a photograph that made my throat tighten. It was me, sitting in that same upstairs bedroom circled on the floor plan. I was maybe 8 years old, wearing a blue hoodie, staring straight at the camera with an expression I couldn't read now. Behind me, in the shadowed corner of the room, a figure stood, blurry but tall. Watching, I froze, my skin prickling. I didn't remember this photo being taken. From somewhere above me, a faint thump broke the silence. My head snapped up toward the staircase. I shouldn't go up there. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but my feet moved anyway, slow and deliberate, the old stairs groaning, under my weight. Halfway up, I glanced toward the wall where the old family photos used to hang, now replaced by faint rectangular patches, the nail holes still visible. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out, dim and narrow. That circled bedroom was at the far end, the door slightly ajar. I reached for the knob. The smell hit me first, not just dust, but something faintly damp and sharp, like old metal and mildew. The room was almost empty, except for a single chair in the center and an old trunk pushed against the far wall. I stepped inside, my shadow spilling across the floor. My fingers hovered over the trunk's latch, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Before I could open it, a voice from the hallway made me freeze. "You weren't supposed to find this." My blood turned cold. The voice was male, low, controlled, but laced with something I couldn't place. Guilt? Anger? Both? I turned slowly. A man stood in the hallway, just outside the pool of light spilling from the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing that same charcoal suit I'd seen earlier tonight, the same one reflected in the photograph with my family. My fingers tightened around the trunk's latch. "Who are you?" My voice was steady, but my throat felt tight. He stepped into view, the dim light revealing a face both unfamiliar and unsettlingly familiar. The shape of his jaw, the green eyes, something in them felt like looking into a distorted mirror. "I'm someone your parents hoped you'd never meet," he said evenly. "And that key? It was supposed to bring you here when you were ready, not tonight." My heart hammered. "Ready for what?" Instead of answering, he glanced down at the trunk. "Open it. You'll understand." Every muscle in my body screamed not to obey, but my curiosity was a stronger force now. My thumb flicked the latch. The lid groaned open, releasing a stale, cold breath of air. Inside were stacks of old VHS tapes, each labeled in my father's handwriting. Dates, years worth of them, going back to when I was a child. Beneath them, folders thick with photographs and typewritten pages. I picked up the top folder and flipped it open. My stomach lurched. It was filled with photos of me, every school year, every sports event, every time I was at the park with friends. But these weren't taken by my parents. The angles were wrong, the distance too far. Some were blurry, as if taken in a hurry. And in almost every one, somewhere in the background, that same man was there, watching. I looked up at him sharply. "You've been following me my entire life." "Protecting you," he corrected, his tone clipped. "That's not protection," I snapped. "That's—" "Ask them," he cut in, his voice suddenly sharp. "Ask your parents why they moved you from this house. Ask why they never told you who I was. Ask them why they made you believe you were safe when you weren't." My phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I pulled it out. Dad's name lit up the screen. I answered, my voice shaking with fury. I'm at the old house. With him. Now tell me the truth. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Maddie, leave. Right now. He's dangerous. The man's expression hardened. Dangerous? He let out a bitter laugh. I kept your daughter alive when you were too busy protecting your image to protect her. What is he talking about? I demanded. Dad's voice cracked, something I'd never heard before. When you were a kid, we got involved with people we shouldn't have. This house, it was their meeting place. And you? He stopped himself, then pushed the words out. You saw something you weren't supposed to. We thought if we moved, if we cut ties. The man in front of me finished the sentence for him. She'd be safe. But they didn't cut ties. They made deals. They traded trust for comfort. My hands trembled. So you've been what? Watching me all these years in case they came back? He didn't answer directly. You won an award tonight? You think that's what your family's angry about? Number. They're angry because someone else saw you on that stage. Someone who remembers. And now they're desperate to pull you back under their roof. Not to protect you, but to control the damage. Dad's voice came again through the phone. Urgent. Do not listen to him. He's twisting. The man stepped closer, his gaze locked on mine. They left you tonight because the less they were seen with you, the better. The trip? Just an excuse. And now that you've got that key, you have more power than you realize. My grip tightened on the phone. Why give me the key at all? Because, he said quietly, this house and everything in it belongs to you. It always has. They signed it over years ago but never told you. These tapes, these records, they're proof, not just of the house but of what they did. I stood there, the weight of the truth pressing in. My family, the same people who'd laughed on a beach instead of sitting in the front row for me, had spent years burying lies under the guise of protection. I looked down at the folder in my hands, at the deeds, the documents, the evidence that could blow their carefully constructed world apart. The phone was still in my ear, Dad's voice breaking through. Maddie, whatever you think you're doing, don't. You'll ruin us. A cold calm settled over me. Maybe you've been ruining yourselves all along. I hung up. The man stepped aside, giving me space to leave with whatever I wanted. My fingers brushed the brass key again as I tucked the folder under my arm. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but for the first time in years, I knew one thing for certain. The next time my family called, it wouldn't be me who was desperate to answer. And as I stepped out into the night, the porch light flickered on, bathing the front yard in pale gold. Somewhere behind me, the man's voice carried softly through the cold air. Welcome home, Madison.
I knew the laughter was for me the second I stepped onto the gravel driveway. It came sharp, high, and pointed, like they'd been rehearsing it since dawn. My cousin Marissa elbowed her sister and whispered loud enough for half the crowd to hear. Well, would you look at that? Didn't know auctions let in people who live paycheck to paycheck. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't give them what they wanted. I just kept walking, heels steady, chin up. I'd learned years ago that silence cuts deeper than snapping back. What they didn't know, what nobody here knew, was that I hadn't been broke in a very, very long time. The estate in front of us stretched wider than 3 football fields, with a white facade and pillars like something out of a magazine. People were buzzing about rumors, $12 million, private gardens, a pool house bigger than normal homes. This place was the crown jewel of the auction circuit, and every wealthy family in the county wanted a piece of it, including mine. And they were thrilled to see me right in the middle of the crowd, like some embarrassment they hoped would disappear if they stared hard enough. Aunt Jenna gave me a slow once-over. Sweetheart, she cooed. This isn't a thrift sale. You don't get discounts for being you. I smiled politely. I know exactly where I am. She smirked like she'd won something. Truth was, I had avoided gatherings with them for years. After Mom passed, things changed. My relatives had treated me like I was a burden, like every breath I took cost them something. When I left home at 19 with 2 suitcases and a dream to build my own real estate research firm, they predicted I'd end up begging for help or crawling back with apologies. I had done neither. Instead, I worked like I had no choice but to win. And it turned out, I was very good at it. By 27, I had clients on both coasts. By 28, Wealthy investors trusted my market forecasts over some companies' entire analytics teams. And a year after that, I made a private deal with a retiring developer that changed my financial life forever. But right now, the only thing they saw was the girl they used to insult at holidays. I walked toward the registration booth. The woman behind the table looked up and smiled warmly. "Name, please?" "Alexis Reed." Her eyebrows lifted. Recognition flickered. She'd clearly seen my credentials, or the bank letter I submitted to qualify. "Welcome, Ms. Reed," she said, handing me a sleek black paddle. "You're cleared for the full bidding range." Marissa, who'd followed me just close enough to eavesdrop, choked on her breath. "Full? You mean?" The registration woman gave her a polite, practiced smile. "Only registered bidders beyond this point, ma'am." Marissa stared at my paddle like it betrayed her personally. I could practically hear her brain scrambling. Alexis? Registered? Fully? It didn't fit the story they'd created about me. Inside the courtyard, I found a quiet corner. People gathered in clusters, discussing budgets and plans to flip or rent the estate. I watched the auctioneer step onto the platform, adjusting his microphone. My heart thudded with adrenaline, not from nerves, but from the anticipation of what was about to unfold. The estate had sentimental weight for my relatives. For 3 generations, they'd dreamed about owning a property like this. They'd been bragging about it for months, telling everyone the Reed clan was finally rising again, as if they hadn't stepped on me every chance they got. But the universe has a funny sense of humor. Because the one person in the family they'd always dismissed as useless, she had the highest spending power in this courtyard. And they had absolutely no idea. The auctioneer lifted his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin in 60 seconds. Marissa's voice carried across the space. "She'll faint before she bids. Watch this." I inhaled slowly.
Calm. Steady.
Focused. My phone vibrated with a message. "Evan, my financial advisor. Funds are cleared. You're good to go, Lex." A small rush of warmth went through my chest. Not from the money, but from knowing I wasn't alone in my fight anymore. I had built a circle of people who respected my work, valued my ideas, and believed in me. The auctioneer slammed the gavel once. "We will begin the bidding for Willowcrest Estate at $6 million. Several paddles lifted immediately, maybe 20. 6.5.
7.
7.5.
8.
My relatives joined too, smug and confident, whispering things like, "We've got this. She'll stay quiet." They weren't wrong. For the first 20 minutes, I stayed silent. 8.2. 8.3. 9 million. People started dropping out. Aunt Jenna's voice rose. 9.5. The crowd murmured. My cousins clapped like seals celebrating. "This is it. We're getting it." I leaned against a marble pillar, checking my watch. Evan had told me exactly the point where everyone else's budgets would tap out. 10 million. 10.2. 10.4. Only 4 bidders remained, including my family. I slipped my paddle between my fingers. The auctioneer wiped his brow. 10,500,000. "Do we have 10.6? Aunt Jenna hesitated. This was their limit. I knew it. She whispered to her husband, panic tinging her voice. "We can't go higher. Not without liquidating something." The auctioneer raised his chin. 10.5 going once. My cousins looked proud. They thought they were winning. Going twice. I raised my paddle gently. 11 million. Gasps rippled like wind through wheat. The auctioneer's eyes lit up. "We have $11 million from bidder 69. Every head turned toward me. My relatives froze like statues. Marissa sputtered. "She what?" "She can't." But I wasn't finished. The auctioneer looked around. "Do we have 11.1? Silence. Not a single paddle moved. Aunt Jenna tried to save face. "We don't compete with theatrics." The auctioneer lifted his gavel high. 11 million, going once. My pulse thrummed. Going twice. A final gasp escaped the crowd.
"Sold."
To Ms. Alexis Reed. The gavel hit the podium with a crack that echoed right through my relative's pride. I lowered my paddle, finally letting myself smile. The girl they mocked? She just bought the estate they came to claim. The courtyard felt strangely quiet after the gavel fell. People whispered, eyes darting toward me like I had broken some unwritten rule. But the only looks I cared about were the ones coming from my relatives, the shock, the confusion, the disbelief. It was almost enough to make me laugh. Aunt Jenna marched toward me first, heels clicking like she was storming a courtroom. "Alexis," she hissed, "tell me you didn't actually bid. You don't have that kind of money." I met her glare calmly. "Why does that bother you so much?" She blinked, thrown off. "It doesn't bother me. We just don't want you making a fool of yourself." I tilted my head. "Funny. You didn't care about that when you all laughed at me walking in." Her face reddened instantly. Before she could respond, my cousin Trevor joined in, puffing his chest. "Look, if you wanted attention, you didn't need to bid on an estate. Just say something next time." I let out a soft breath. I didn't do it for attention. They stared at me, waiting for an explanation. I didn't know them. Their expectations of me were still trapped in the past, back when I worked late nights at diners to afford community college textbooks. They didn't know how much I'd grown, how many people now depended on me professionally, how much I had changed since leaving their negativity behind. Marissa crossed her arms.
Well,
"Are you going to explain how you magically afford a $12 million estate? Or is this another one of your fantasies?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I don't owe you a breakdown of my finances. But I will say this. While you all spent the last few years gossiping about me, I spent mine building something real." They exchanged uneasy glances. "It wasn't magic," I continued. "It was work. Something you never saw, because you were too busy assuming I'd fail." Their expressions sank, one by one. Before they could recover, the auction staff approached me with a tablet. "Ms. Reed, congratulations. We'll finalize paperwork in the main office." "Thank you," I said, following him past my frozen relatives. Their silence felt like closure. Inside the office, everything moved quickly: signatures, confirmation emails, proof of funds. The estate manager, a polite man named Daniel, looked genuinely impressed. "You've secured a beautiful property," he said. "Any plans yet?" "Yes," I replied. "This will be the headquarters for my new development firm. I want it to be a place where women in real estate can actually grow instead of getting pushed aside." His eyes widened. "That's incredible. We don't hear that often." "Someone's got to change the narrative," I said. He laughed softly. "Well, you certainly made an entrance today." When I exited the office, my relatives were still standing in the courtyard. They looked smaller now, like their confidence had drained out of them. For a second, I felt a pang of something, maybe old hurt, maybe old memories, but it passed. Aunt Jenna approached again, but slower this time. "Alexis, you really bought it?" she asked, voice thin. "Yes," I said simply. She swallowed hard. "We didn't know you were doing so well." "That was kind of the point," I said. "You never ask." Marissa fidgeted, her earlier smugness gone. "So, what happens now?" I adjusted my bag, giving them a faint smile. Calm, controlled, genuine. "What happens now? I go home. I keep working. I keep growing. And maybe one day you'll realize success doesn't look the way you expected." Their faces dropped again, but this time they didn't argue. I turned toward the exit, warm sunlight stretching across the driveway. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. 2 weeks after the auction, Willow Crest didn't feel like a stranger's estate anymore. The gates opened automatically when my car approached, the long driveway glowing under the evening lights I'd just had installed. It felt surreal, peaceful, earned, mine. I walked across the marble foyer, listening to the echo of my footsteps. The renovation team had already cleared the old furniture, and the space felt like a blank canvas ready for my next chapter. My next headquarters. My next beginning. I stood near the tall windows, overlooking the gardens, when my phone buzzed. A text from Evan. "Media picked up your auction win. Congratulations again, Lex." I smiled. I didn't care about press coverage, but it was satisfying to know the story was out there. Not for revenge, Not for attention, but because it showed how far I'd come since everyone counted me out. I turned when I heard footsteps. The estate manager, Daniel, walked in with a stack of plans. Ready to go over the layout? Absolutely, I said. We spent the next hour reviewing every detail: workspace designs, conference rooms, the mentorship wing for young women entering real estate. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a genuine sense of purpose. Not proving anyone wrong, building something right. When we wrapped up, Daniel gathered his papers. Your team's going to love this place. And I have to say, what you did at that auction, that took courage. It took history, I corrected softly. Years of it. He nodded with understanding. Well, you changed yours today. After he left, I stepped outside onto the balcony as warm wind brushed against my shoulders. The sunset washed the entire estate in gold, and for a moment, I just stood there breathing it all in. Then I heard tires crunching on the gravel below. I looked down. My relatives, Aunt Jenna, Marissa, Trevor, they were all standing outside their car, shifting awkwardly, unsure whether they should walk closer or leave. I sighed, grounding myself. This wasn't something I feared anymore. I made my way downstairs and opened the front door. You guys need something? Aunt Jenna clasped her hands. We, wanted to apologize. Trevor nodded quickly.
Yeah.
We didn't realize you were doing so well. Marissa swallowed hard. We shouldn't have mocked you. It wasn't right. Their voices were quiet, almost embarrassed. It was the first time in my life any of them had apologized for anything. I leaned against the doorway, not angry, just tired of the old story. It wasn't about money.
It was about respect.
And how you treated me. Aunt Jenna looked down. We know. And we're sorry. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. I appreciate it. Their heads lifted slightly, hopeful. But I continued gently. I'm not living in the past anymore. I worked for this life. I built it without you. I'm not angry. I'm just done trying to earn approval I never needed. They looked stunned, but they nodded. And that moment, calm, clear, peaceful, felt like the real victory. Not the estate, not the money, freedom. After my relatives drove away, the estate settled back into its quiet evening rhythm. Lights shimmered along the walking paths, and the fountains in the courtyard hummed softly. For the first time, the place didn't feel intimidating. It felt like home. I wandered through the empty halls, running my hand along the newly polished banisters. This wasn't just an estate. It was proof of every sleepless night, every risk I'd taken, every moment I refused to give up when people expected me to break. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Evan. Everything okay? You sounded tense earlier. I typed back. All good. They came to apologize. I think this chapter is closed. A moment later, he replied. Proud of you. You handled it with more grace than most people would. I smiled. Grace wasn't something I had growing up, it was something I had to learn in order to survive. I stepped outside onto the stone patio. The air smelled fresh, and cicadas buzzed faintly in the distance. I sat at the edge of the garden, staring at the silhouette of the estate against the fading light. This place was the beginning of my new company, but it was also the beginning of something more personal. The life I'd built without needing validation or approval from people who once dismissed me. The garden gates creaked open, and I turned to see Daniel walking up with a clipboard tucked under his arm. Didn't mean to intrude, he said. Just wanted to drop off the final blueprint revisions. I waved him over. You're not intruding. I could use a distraction. He sat beside me on the stone bench. Long day. A symbolic one, I said with a small laugh. My relative showed up. Tried to apologize. He raised an eyebrow. And how'd that go? I accepted it, I replied. But I didn't let them back into a place in my life they never earned. He nodded slowly. Healthy choice. I glanced at him. Feels like this estate isn't just a business move for me. It's healing something. He smiled. Then it's already worth the investment. For a moment, we sat quietly, two people on a stone bench, looking out at a future rising from the ashes of old wounds. Alexis, he said gently, I've seen a lot of people buy properties, but I've never seen anyone reclaim their story quite like you did. I felt warmth rise in my chest. Thank you. That means more than you know. He stood, offering a hand to help me up. Ready to see the new office swing tomorrow? Absolutely. As we walked back toward the entrance, the estate lights flickered on one by one, glowing like a promise. I paused at the door, taking it all in. The girl who once felt small, ignored, and underestimated was gone. In her place stood a woman who had built her own path, her own company, and now, her own estate. My revenge wasn't the purchase. It was the quiet confidence of a life I shaped myself. A life that finally felt like mine. My phone buzzed. I barely glanced at the notification before I swiped it open, expecting something random from my sister, Danielle. Maybe a meme. Maybe one of those fake-friendly check-ins she had been doing more often lately. But the moment my eyes landed on the text, my stomach dropped. It was a screenshot of a group chat. And right at the top, her message read, "She's so dumb. She still thinks we care about her. Just wait until we get what we want." My heart slammed against my ribs. I scanned the chat, laughing emojis, agreement from people I thought were my friends. This wasn't just a mistake. This was proof. My sister had been playing me. For months, she'd been acting nice, checking in, inviting me to hangouts. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had changed. But I was just a game to her. And now I needed to find out what they wanted, before I burned it all down. I swallowed down the lump of betrayal in my throat and forced my fingers to move. Me. Haha, what's this? I wanted to see how she would react. Within seconds, the typing bubble appeared. Danielle. OMG. Ignore that. It wasn't about you. Just a joke. Sent it by accident.
Right.
Because laughing about tricking me was just so funny. I let my thumbs hover over my keyboard for a second, before responding. Me. Oh, LOL. No worries. Anyway, what were you saying about this weekend? I'd love to hang out. Smiling face with smiling eyes. She took the bait. Danielle. YSSS girl. Can't wait.
She thought I was still blind.
Good. That made this so much easier. That weekend, I met up with them at a trendy cafe, playing my part. Danielle hugged me when she saw me, like we were the closest sisters in the world. I hugged her back, letting her believe she was winning. Her friends greeted me like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't trashed me behind my back. We chatted for a while, small talk, fake laughter, until... "So, I heard you got a raise at work," Danielle said, eyes gleaming. "That's huge for you."
Oh.
So that's what they wanted. Money. I gave them a sheepish smile. Oh, yeah, just a small bump in salary. Nothing major. I saw disappointment flicker in her eyes before she masked it with fake excitement. But I wasn't done yet. Honestly, I sighed dramatically. I was actually thinking of investing in a business soon. Maybe even getting a place of my own. I watched them perk up, like vultures circling a fresh kill. Over the next few weeks, I let them think they were tightening their grip. Danielle started acting like the best sister ever. She invited me out more, called me every day, asked about my job, my plans, my finances. "You should totally invest in my friend's business," she said one night, grinning.
Right.
Because handing over my money to some scammer she knew was totally a great idea. I pretended to consider it, nodding thoughtfully. But behind the scenes, I was locking everything down. I changed my banking passwords. I removed Danielle from my emergency contacts. I even talked to a lawyer about setting up extra security on my finances. Because when I cut them off, they weren't going to get a single penny. One night, Danielle invited me to a party at her friend's house. I wasn't planning to go. But then, as she was grabbing drinks, I saw her phone light up on the table. I normally wouldn't snoop.
But this?
This wasn't normal. I glanced down. Message preview. "She's coming to the party, right? Make sure she drinks a lot. It'll be easier that way." A chill ran down my spine.
What the hell?
I was done pretending, but I needed one last act before I exposed them. At the party, I let Danielle hand me a drink. I even pretended to sip it. Then I wandered into another room. And that's when I heard it. She has access to so much money, one of Danielle's friends whispered. We just have to get her to sign something. That was it. That was all I needed. I walked back in, drink still in hand, and sat down next to Danielle. And then, in front of everyone, I said, So, which one of you came up with this little scam? Silence. Then Danielle laughed nervously. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, showed them the screenshot she accidentally sent me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The blood drained from her face. And then, like clockwork, her fake excuses started pouring in. But I was already gone. The moment I walked out of that party, I felt lighter. It was like a weight had been lifted from my chest, the suffocating presence of fake love, manipulation, and years of deception. But I knew walking away wasn't enough. I needed to make sure they could never touch me again. The first thing I did? I blocked every single one of them.
Danielle.
Her fake friends. The people who had laughed at me behind my back while pretending to be my friends.
Gone.
Then, I went through my emails, social media, and accounts. I changed passwords, updated security questions, removed every trace of my sister from anything she had access to. My finances?
Locked down.
My phone? Changed my number. I wasn't just cutting her off. I was erasing her access to my life entirely. By the time I was done, there was no way she could ever contact me again. And that's when the calls started coming in from our mother. I stared at my phone, watching my mom's name flash across the screen. I knew exactly what this was. Danielle had gone running to her, playing the victim, spinning a story where I was the cruel, ungrateful sister who had abandoned her family. I sighed and picked up. Before I could even say a word, my mom's sharp voice cut through the line. What did you do to Danielle? I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice calm. Mom, did she tell you what she tried to do? She said you embarrassed her in front of her friends, humiliated her for no reason, and now she's crying her eyes out. Do you know how heartless that makes you look? My grip tightened around my phone. Of course, Danielle didn't tell the full story. Mom, I said slowly, I have proof. She was using me, manipulating me. She only wanted my money, and when I didn't fall for it, she tried to trap me into signing something drunk. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Silence. For the first time, Mom hesitated. But then, as always, she fell back on her excuses. She's your sister, honey. Family forgives. Maybe she just... No, my voice was firm, unshaken. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's not a mistake. She knew exactly what she was doing. Another pause. Then, softer, more manipulative. You know she's struggling right now. Can't you just help her a little? My heart went cold. That was it. That was the reason my mother was really calling. She didn't care about what Danielle had done. She only cared that I was financially stable and that my sister could still use me as a safety net. Goodbye, Mom.
Click.
For the first time in my life, I chose myself. And I refused to feel guilty for it. The next day, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called my lawyer. Hey, I need to make sure my finances and assets are protected from any potential fraud attempts. She asked me a few questions, and when I explained the situation, she didn't even hesitate. You need to set up legal barriers, she said. Freeze any shared accounts, flag suspicious activity, and secure your personal assets. If she's desperate, she could try to forge signatures or manipulate people to access your money. I felt a chill go down my spine. I never thought my own sister would stoop that low. But she had already proven what she was capable of. So, I didn't wait. By the end of the day, I had closed old joint accounts, set up fraud alerts on my bank accounts, informed my employer that no one, not even family, was authorized to handle my documents, filed a legal notice restricting any financial requests related to my name. It was exhausting. But when I finally lay in bed that night, I knew one thing for certain. Danielle could never touch me again. 3 days passed. Then, out of nowhere, an email popped up in my inbox. From Danielle. Subject: I'm sorry, please call me. I just stared at it. I knew what this was. The classic manipulator playbook. Phase 1. Try to gaslight me into thinking it was all a misunderstanding. Phase 2. If that doesn't work, play the victim and beg for sympathy. Phase 3. If all else fails, turn to rage and blame me. I clicked it open, scanning her words. I don't know what happened between us. I feel like you misunderstood everything, and I wish we could just go back to being the close sisters we were. Please, can we meet up and talk? I just want my sister back. I love you. My fingers hovered over the reply button. But then I thought back to that night. The laughing in the group chat. The way she tried to set me up. The way she saw me as nothing more than a paycheck. And I closed the email. Unread. Danielle had lost the right to be in my life. The strangest part about cutting my sister out? I expected to feel alone. But instead, I started noticing something else. The people who actually cared about me, truly, deeply cared, were still here. A close friend from work noticed I seemed off. She invited me over, just to talk. We shared a bottle of wine, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed, a real, deep laugh. Another friend sent me a message. Hey, I saw you cut ties with Danielle. I just wanted to say, I get it. If you ever need to talk, I'm here.
And it hit me.
I spent so much time trying to earn my sister's love, trying to prove I was good enough for her. And yet, the whole time, I already had people who loved me for who I was. I just needed to choose them instead. The last message I ever got from Danielle came 2 weeks later. It was short, bitter. You think you're better than me? I stared at the screen for a long time. And then, without hesitation, I deleted it. She no longer had power over me. She never would again. The day after I deleted Danielle's final message, I woke up feeling different. Lighter.
Clearer.
For years, I had carried the weight of her expectations, her manipulations, her conditional love, and now it was finally gone. I made my coffee and sat on my balcony, watching the city come to life. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for my happiness. But cutting her off wasn't just about deleting a number.
It was about rebuilding my life in a way that was truly mine.
That meant setting new boundaries. That meant choosing kindness, but only for those who truly deserved it. And that meant never, ever letting someone like Danielle into my life again. It wasn't easy. A week later, I got a call from my mother again. This time, she wasn't yelling. She was crying. Danielle's struggling, she whispered. She's in a really bad place. I know she hurt you, but she's still your sister. She needs you. I gripped my phone, taking a deep breath. The old me, the one desperate for validation, for approval, might have caved. But not anymore. I kept my voice calm, firm. She needed me when she was laughing about using me. She needed me when she was trying to trap me. I gave her chances, Mom. She burned every single one. Silence.
Then,
I just don't understand why you're being so cold. That stung. Because the truth was, I wasn't being cold. I was just finally protecting myself. But to people who benefit from your lack of boundaries, self-respect always looks like cruelty. I'm not cold, I said softly. I'm just done. And for the first time, I really meant it. One afternoon, I walked into my favorite cafe, ready to write in my journal, something that had become my new routine. As I ordered my coffee, I overheard a woman in front of me struggling to pay. Her card wasn't working. She fumbled in her bag, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Without thinking, I tapped my card on the machine. On me, I said with a small smile. She looked at me, stunned. Wait, seriously? I nodded. I've been there before. It's okay. Her eyes welled up with tears. You have no idea how much this means to me, she whispered. I just got out of a really bad situation. Today was supposed to be my fresh start, and she stopped, shaking her head. You just made my whole day. I blinked, realizing something huge. For years, I had wasted my kindness on people who didn't deserve it. But that didn't mean kindness itself was wrong. It just meant I needed to give it to the right people. People who wouldn't take it for granted. 3 months passed. Life was good. Peaceful. Then one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I debated ignoring it, but something in my gut told me to answer. The moment I picked up, I regretted it. It was Danielle. She was sobbing. "Please, I need help." I stayed silent. I have nothing left," she choked out. "Mom won't give me money. My friends turned their backs on me. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. This was exactly what she had done to me for years. Played the victim, pulled up my emotions, expected me to drop everything and save her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said quietly. "But I can't help you." She inhaled sharply. "What? You're just going to let me suffer?" "You let me suffer." That shut her up. I didn't say anything else. I just hung up. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. That night, I met up with the people who had become my real family. Friends who had stood by me. People who had never once used me, manipulated me, or made me feel like I had to earn their love. As we laughed over dinner, I realized something. Family isn't about who you share blood with. It's about the people who show up for you, not just when they need something, but when you need them, too. Danielle and I had been born into the same family. But that didn't mean I had to keep her in my life. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is let go of the people who only bring you pain. And that's exactly what I did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't waiting for the next time Danielle would use me. I wasn't worried about being tricked, manipulated, or laughed at behind my back. I was free. And freedom tasted better than any fake relationship ever could. I focused on myself. I started a new hobby, traveled, strengthened the friendships that truly mattered. And most of all, I stopped apologizing for choosing myself. Months turned into a year. Danielle faded into a distant memory, just another lesson in my past. I never checked up on her, never wondered what she was doing, because for the first time, my happiness wasn't tied to her anymore. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset, a thought crossed my mind. If I could go back, would I do anything differently? And the answer was simple.
No.
Because sometimes the people you think are meant to love you the most are actually the ones you need to walk away from. And when you finally do, that's when you find real happiness. The sound of rolling suitcases echoed through Terminal 3 like a drumbeat of judgment. "Move faster, Mia," my father barked, his voice sharp enough to slice through the crowd. "You're holding us up again. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin." I bit my tongue and stepped aside as my stepsister Lila strutted past me, her designer heels clicking on the polished floor like a countdown to humiliation. She tossed her glossy blonde hair back and smirked. "Maybe she's nervous," she said, glancing at me. "It's probably her first time seeing a plane up close." My father chuckled, not even trying to hide his disdain. "She can't even afford economy, Lila. Don't expect her to know how airports work." Laughter followed. Heads turned. Heat burned through my face. But I didn't say a word. I just adjusted the strap of my old backpack and stared at the giant glass windows where planes gleamed under the morning sun. They were flying first class to New York for a family celebration, one I was technically invited to but never truly wanted to attend. Lila lifted her boarding pass with a grin. "First class boarding, Daddy. We'll have champagne before takeoff." "Enjoy that," I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "Don't be bitter. Some of us just make better life choices." That one stung. Because 2 years ago, I'd made a choice, walking away from my father's company after he married a woman only 5 years older than me and handed her daughter, Lila, everything I'd built. Now they stood there, all smiles and status, while I was the outsider with an old suitcase and a quiet face. "Do us a favor," my father said, lowering his voice. "Try not to embarrass the family name. People talk." I looked him dead in the eye.
People always talk, Dad.
"It's what they say later that matters." Before he could reply, the loudspeaker announced boarding for their flight. They gathered their bags and headed for the gate. Lila turned, smirking over her shoulder. "See you in coach if you can afford the ticket." They laughed as they walked away. I watched them disappear into the gate tunnel, my chest tight but my expression steady. Around me, travelers rushed past, families hugging, businessmen scrolling, children crying. But then, a shadow crossed the polished floor.
Boots.
Polished black leather. A tall man in a navy uniform stopped in front of me, posture crisp, voice calm but commanding. "Miss Monroe?" My father's laughter still echoed faintly from the gate. "Yes," I said. The officer straightened. "Your jet's ready, ma'am. We'll begin pre-flight whenever you're ready." The words sliced through the noise like thunder. My father turned around mid-step. Lila froze beside him. Their faces drained of color as a dozen passengers stopped to stare. I blinked once, slowly, then smiled. Perfect timing. I was getting tired of standing. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the officer gestured toward the private terminal beyond the security barrier. A sleek black car waited near the runway. Lila's mouth fell open. "Jet? Her?" The officer gave a professional nod. "Yes, ma'am. Miss Monroe owns it." I met my father's stunned eyes. "You were right, Dad. I can't afford economy." I paused, then added softly, "It's too small for me now." Then I turned and walked away, calm, composed, my heart pounding with every step. The glass doors opened, and sunlight spilled across the tarmac. The wind whipped my hair as the hum of engines filled the air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt untouchable. The door of the luxury jet closed behind me with a soft hiss, sealing out the chaos of the airport. The scent of polished leather and espresso replaced the cheap perfume and laughter I'd just walked away from. "Welcome aboard, Miss Monroe," said Officer Grant, now smiling with a kind of quiet respect that came from knowing exactly who I was. I sank into a cream-colored seat by the window as the engines rumbled alive beneath the floor. The city stretched below like a story I'd already finished reading. As the jet began to taxi, my phone buzzed, Dad flashing on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mia," his voice snapped, sharp as ever. "What kind of joke are you playing?" "No joke," I replied coolly. "I just stopped living by your version of success." "I asked you to be practical," he snapped. "Instead, you ran off chasing dreams." "Dreams," I said, leaning back, "built the company you're still running, Dad. The one I helped design before you replaced me with Lila." There was silence. Then his voice dropped lower. "You could have stayed, Mia. You didn't have to walk out." I stared out the window, remembering that night 2 years ago, the shouting, the betrayal, the moment he handed my project portfolio to Lila as if I'd never existed. "You're right," I said softly. "I didn't have to. I chose to." The line went dead. Grant stepped forward, setting a folder on the table beside me. "Your itinerary, ma'am. Meeting with the investors in Manhattan at 3 p.m. Your security team will escort you from the terminal." "Thank you," I said, closing the folder. He hesitated. "If I may say so, it's not every day someone takes back everything they lost." I smiled faintly. "It's not about taking it back. It's about becoming the person they said you'd never be." The engines roared, and the plane lifted, smooth, powerful, defiant. I watched the clouds swallow the ground, my reflection faint in the glass. 2 years ago, I'd walked out of my father's office with nothing but a laptop, a handful of contacts, and a promise to myself that I'd never beg anyone for a chance again. While Lila flaunted her new life on social media, I worked nights, coding, designing, building a startup no one believed in. When investors laughed, I kept going. When the bank refused my loan, I sold my car. When everything seemed impossible, I remembered that humiliation in my father's boardroom, his exact words, "You'll never make it without me." But I did. And now, that silly idea he mocked, a small AI logistics company named Monrovia Systems, had become a global tech solution worth hundreds of millions. Every insult, every laugh, every door slammed in my face built the woman sitting on this jet. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ma'am, the New York media's been calling. They heard you'll be attending the Global Tech Summit this evening. Do you want to make a statement? I glanced at my phone screen again. Another message from my father. Just one word this time. How? I typed back, by being everything you thought I couldn't. Then I hit send. The jet sliced through the clouds as sunlight bathed the cabin in gold. My reflection in the glass looked older, calmer, stronger. For years, I'd let them define me as the quiet one, the forgotten daughter. But now, they'd have to learn my name again on billboards and headlines in every corner of the business world. And tonight, when I landed in Manhattan, the same family that laughed at me in the terminal would be at the same summit, sponsored by my company. They just didn't know it yet. I smiled as the city skyline began to rise in the distance. The real takeoff hadn't just happened in the air, it had started the day I walked away from them. The jet wheels kissed the runway with a low hum as Manhattan's skyline glimmered ahead like a challenge. I exhaled slowly, collecting myself. Tonight wasn't just a business event, it was closure. Grant walked me down the private terminal steps to a waiting black SUV. The moment the tinted door shut, my assistant, Sophie, turned from the front seat, tablet in hand. Everything's ready, ma'am. The Global Tech Summit begins in 2 hours. You'll open the event as the keynote sponsor. Perfect, I said, my tone steady, though my pulse had its own rhythm. And the guest list? She smiled knowingly. Richard Monroe and his daughter confirmed attendance this morning. Of course they did. My father never turned down an opportunity for publicity. What he didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that Monrovia Systems wasn't just sponsoring the summit. It owned it this year. As the SUV glided through the city streets, I caught glimpses of billboards flashing my company's logo, neon blue against midnight black. 2 years ago, I was the invisible daughter. Tonight, I was the headline. When we pulled up at the glass-covered venue, camera lights flickered like 1,000 heartbeats. Reporters crowded the entrance. I stepped out into the flashes, wearing a sleek navy dress, not designer-branded, but confident, elegant mine. A journalist shouted, "Miss Monroe, is it true Monrovia Systems bought the Global Tech Network?" I met her gaze and smiled faintly. Let's just say, I like to own the places I was once denied entry to. Inside, chandeliers glittered above the marble floors. Conversations buzzed. Suits, champagne, ego, all the same world that once laughed me out of its rooms. And then I saw them. Across the hall, my father, Richard Monroe, was deep in conversation with a group of investors. His new wife, polished as ever, stood beside him. Lila hovered nearby in a red gown, smiling for attention, her laughter echoing just like it did at the airport. They hadn't seen me yet. "Miss Monroe," an announcer called, stepping onto the stage. "Please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, the CEO of Monrovia Systems." The crowd clapped. My father turned toward the stage, clapping politely until he froze. The microphone light hit my face. Recognition slammed into his expression. Lila's hand dropped from her glass. "Mia," she whispered. I smiled calmly, my heels silent against the stage as I stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. 2 years ago, I was told I'd never belong in this room. Tonight, my company sponsors it." The audience laughed lightly, impressed. But I wasn't joking. I looked directly at my father as I continued, my voice unwavering. I built Monrovia Systems from a single laptop and a coffee shop corner. No inheritance, no investors, just grit and the memory of being told I wasn't enough. Lila's face twisted, but I went on. People often ask what motivates success. For me, it was simple. Humiliation is a louder teacher than privilege. Applause rose, scattered, genuine. My father's hands stayed frozen mid-clap. After the speech, as the crowd mingled, he approached, slowly, cautiously, as though crossing enemy ground. "Mia, I didn't know you were successful." I interrupted, my tone soft but sharp. "No, you didn't. You were too busy celebrating my replacement." Lila stepped forward. "We didn't mean." "You meant every word," I said quietly. At the airport, at the office, every time you laughed at what you thought was failure. But you forgot. Some of us rebuild in silence. My father looked at the floor. You're still my daughter. I nodded.
Yes.
Just not the one you raised. As the orchestra began to play, the crowd swirled around us, business partners shaking my hand, journalists asking for interviews. My father stood lost in the lights, realizing the hierarchy had shifted. Tonight, I didn't just win. I rewrote the story, and they were forced to watch it happen. The night had thinned to a soft hum of music and murmurs. Investors toasted. Journalists scribbled. But at the heart of the grand ballroom, Richard Monroe stood frozen, watching the daughter he once dismissed now command every spotlight in sight. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their silence was enough. Sophie approached me with a glass of sparkling water. Ma'am, the media wants a closing statement before we end. I took the glass, my eyes still on my father across the room. Let them wait a minute. Lila stood beside him, her red lipstick faltering into a nervous line. She whispered something, but Richard didn't move. His expression had changed, less arrogance, more disbelief, maybe even regret. When I finally walked over, conversations around us dimmed. He straightened his jacket, trying to recover old dignity. Mia, he said quietly, I should have known. You were always sharp. I just didn't think that I could succeed without you. I cut in, voice calm, even kind. You made that clear. He exhaled. I said things I regret. No, I replied, setting my glass on the table. You said things that built me. His eyes met mine, tired, defeated. You could have told me. We could have worked together. I smiled faintly. You taught me that working with you meant losing myself. I didn't walk away to punish you. I walked away to remember who I was. Lila stepped forward, forcing a shaky laugh.
Come on, Mia.
Don't act like some hero. You got lucky with investors. That's all. I turned to her, still smiling. Luck doesn't keep you in business for 2 years straight. And investors don't buy companies, they buy belief. Something you've never had in anyone but yourself. Her face hardened. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. It just makes me free. Behind me, the announcer called for closing remarks. Sophie gestured toward the stage, but I raised a hand. 1 second. I looked back at my father, my voice dropping to something softer, real. You know what hurt most? It wasn't losing the company. It was realizing my family only valued me when I was convenient. He swallowed hard. You're right. I failed you. For a moment, I almost believed his sincerity. Almost. But some apologies come too late to matter. So instead of bitterness, I offered something he didn't expect, grace. I forgive you, I said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I do. I carried that weight long enough. He blinked, stunned. Mia. I stepped back, glancing at the glowing banner above the stage, Monrovia Systems, building the future. You were right about one thing, Dad, I said, smiling softly. I couldn't afford economy. I was never meant to fly that low. And with that, I turned, walking back toward the stage. The spotlight hit, the cameras rolled, and applause thundered through the hall as I gave the final speech. I talked about resilience, the power of rebuilding, and how being underestimated was the best training ground for success. But as I spoke, I saw my father and Lila near the exit, watching in silence as the crowd stood for me, the daughter they'd mocked, now leading an empire. When the applause ended, I stepped off stage, heart calm. Sophie handed me my coat and whispered, You did it. I looked back once more toward the doors. No, I said. I just stopped letting them define what it meant. Outside, the city shimmered with 1,000 lights. My jet waited on the private strip again, engines humming softly. As I climbed aboard, Grant saluted. Back to California, ma'am? I smiled. Home. Wherever that really is. And as the plane rose through the clouds, I thought of that morning at the airport. The laughter, the humiliation. Now, miles above them, I finally understood. Some farewells aren't said with words. They're written in altitude.